All right, Ray. So what we're seeing across the new car market is we're having a steady increase of supply, and we're also seeing a steady increase of sales across all these new car manufacturers. But it's not translating to a massive jump in used car sales, and that seems very odd to me because it seems as the more that these new car dealers are able to sell, the more that these manufacturers are able to sell, we should get a lot more used car inventory into the system, and it really doesn't seem like it's happening that way. See, I'm going to these used car dealer auctions, and that's just not what I'm seeing in the ground. But from Cox Automotive, we're seeing a slight uptick in used vehicle sales in 2025, but supply is staying tight, and that's really what I'm seeing right now. But it seems as if we get more and more of these new sales, it should translate into a lot more supply for used car dealers, which should also translate into a lot more sales. And I don't think that's the case right now.
Well, maybe we're getting more new car sales with fewer trade-ins. I
I think
think
so.
that I think that could be part of what we're seeing. Um, because let's face it, people who bought a car 3 years ago who might want to get into a new car now are so far upside down in the value of their trade compared to what they still owe on it that they can't get out of them. So the people that perhaps are in the market buying new vehicles, we're seeing fewer and fewer trade-ins. Um, I believe in the article it said that they anticipate that in 2024 we're going to see about 37 million used car sales. A little over 20 million of which will be retail. So about 17 million are just wholesale cars. There is no dramatic increase in used car inventory coming to save the day. It's just not happening. Now, will that translate into a slight uptick in used car sales next year? I don't know. There's talk that manufacturers are going to have to be more aggressive, and we're going to see the lowering of MSRPs next year. So if we see that, you would think that would drive more new car sales, not necessarily more used car sales. So I'm at a little bit of a loss.
So what's interesting to me here, you can see Cox Automotive expects used car sales to grow just by 1% year over year, and like the number you said, 37 million in 2025. But we should be getting way more inventory. I know that wholesale prices have really fallen off a cliff. And I can promise you that in 2025, I'm going to sell way more vehicles on my used lot than I did back in 2024, just because I'm available, the availability of me to be able to go in there and buy more of these used cars. But what's interesting is they're only expecting it to raise by 1%. I know these are forecasts. I think this forecast is wrong because I think what's going to happen is as you get more of these manufacturers to continue to lower some of their prices, to add more incentives, you're going to have more new cars being sold over 2025. I think a large percentage in 2025 over 2024, and that's going to translate into more trade-ins. And I think that's a great thing for the used car market. We need velocity of money. We need transactions to happen both on the new car side and the used car side, and that just pushes prices down across the board and increases the volume. So I think their forecast is, I'm saying, I think it's wrong, in my
You think it's
opinion, from
too
what I'm
low?
going to see. Yeah.
Well, I think perhaps on the end of the market that you deal in, you will have more availability. On the newer, younger, lower mileage, 2 to 3, 4 year old vehicles, that I think is where availability will remain tight for quite some time. And the reason I say that, and I feel like I should pat myself on the back because I've been saying this for a year or more, um, and they're finally catching on. But if there will be in excess of 1 million lease returns that won't happen in 2025 because there were in excess of 1 million cars that should have been leased that weren't leased because of shortages. So 2 and 3 year leases that are coming due are few and far between compared to what historically they would have been. Historically, about 30 to 35% of all cars that are sold on a monthly basis are actually leased. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that number was hovering around 15 to 17%. And when you extrapolate that out over the course of a year, that meant there were about 1 million cars less. There were at least 1 million cars that should have been leased that were not. So those cars ain't coming back into the marketplace, which means 2, 3, and 4-year-old cars, inventory constraints are still going to be there. There's just going to be a tight market for those. And I don't think we'll see any great reduction in pricing on younger, lower mileage used car vehicles. I think in the part of the market that you play in, the $5,000 and under market, I think you'll see a tremendous increase in availability, because whatever trades there are that will be happening with those new car purchases will probably be older vehicles, in my opinion.
I got a question for you. So I want to go back to something you said earlier. You felt like the amount of like the new sales were going up, but you're thinking that maybe the percentage of people that are trading in their cars is going down
Yes.
due to the amount of negative equities. So
Yes.
do you think that the people who have all this negative equity, are they not trying to get rid of those cars in some capacity? I feel like it would take that buyer out of the market, because in a lot of cases, those consumers, they need to use that trade in for their down payment pretty much, right?
Absolutely. There are, we did at Car Edge our fourth quarter survey of negative equity, and the percentage of people that had negative equity went up about 8%, 6 to 8% over the third quarter, and the biggest percentage of change was in EVs, where 54% of all EV owners also own negative equity. They have
Right.
greater negative equity associated with an EV. If those people want to get out of their cars, and I was in retail automotive on the new car side for a very, very long time, and I know that from my experience, most people were trying to trade out of their cars every 3 to 3.5 years. Well, if you financed a car for 60 months, 48 or 60 months, that was doable. If you financed the car for 72 or 84 months, plus you paid a huge market adjustment on top of that, like people did in 2021, 2022, 2023, guess what? You're not getting out of it in 3 to 3.5 years, because you are carrying way more negative equity than you had been the last time around. And so that is taking people out of the market who normally would have been in the market and normally would have traded a vehicle in. That's why I think we're going to continue to see a shortage of younger, lower mileage pre-owned cars. The trade-ins that happen against new cars moving forward, I think, will be more of the older variety, much like what you specialize in.
So you were in the market for what, 3 decades or more, and
43 years.
So 4 decades.
Yes.
And you've seen trade-ins and the equity situation through all of these years. Can you relate this back to any era or anything of when there's so many people coming into these car dealerships and they don't even realize how far upside down they are? Or is this the worst you think that it's ever been?
Well, I can remember right before the great financial crisis, the Great Recession, and everybody at that time seemed to be using their homes, if they were a homeowner, They were using their homes to buy things. And so that if people had negative equity, I remember I had a couple and they wanted to buy an MDX. And literally they were like 25 or 25 20 to $25,000 upside down on their trade. Okay? And they did it anyway because their rationale was that they would take $25,000 from their home equity line of credit to be able to pay off their existing vehicle, and they could afford then to get the new MDX. That was great before the crash, before suddenly their home, that was their bank account, suddenly became underwater. So even though we probably saw greater amounts of negative equity being traded in 2006, 2007, early 2008, it didn't seem to impact sales as much because people availed themselves of the bank that they had in their home. Today, I think people are being a tad more realistic than back then. They're not using their home as a bank to cover the negative equity that they have in their trades. And I think they're shocked at the amount of negative equity that they do have, so that they don't find an easy way out. And maybe the reality of the situation for those folks is the easy way out is to pay off the damn loan, is to keep making your payments till you pay off the damn loan. Wouldn't that be an interesting way to live? Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, tell every living person you know that they need to subscribe to Car Sense with Brandon and Ray.
So it's very interesting, and I feel so bad for these people, but in a way that, I mean, they did it to themselves, right? Think about the Dodge Charger or Challenger customer from like a year and a half ago, where they were paying $50,000 MSRP for one of these things, plus that $10,000 to $15,000 dealer markup.
Yes.
And then now we have reports of next year that Dodge is going to be lowering prices by almost 30% across the board. So that $50,000 vehicle is now going to be, I mean, what? It's $35,000
as a brand new car now.
Yeah, and they still owe probably $50,000 on this thing that they bought 2 years ago, because they're not going to put very much money down.
And if they owe $50,000, okay, and let's say the new car prices are reduced 30%, and so a comparable new one would be $35,000. What would that make a 2-year-old one worth? 20, 25,000, maybe. So guess what? They're $25,000 upside down. Okay, because they paid the market adjustment. It's just, they financed it for 72 or 84 months. This is the folly of buying things on payment and just buying it based on how much the monthly payment is, as opposed to how much you could actually afford. And so the folly of buying a payment is you get locked into a 7-year loan, or in some cases an 8-year loan. And, your desire 3.5 to 4 years in is to get a new car. And you couldn't if your life depended on it.
What I fear for a lot of these consumers that are in that same situation, something that's good for the car market, but really bad for those consumers, is if we have this brand like Stellantis that comes in and cuts these prices 30% across the board, it's going to create a ripple effect across the car market where other brands are going to do something similar. Maybe not that dramatic, because the other brands didn't increase their prices by the amounts that Stellantis did, but it's going to create some downward pressure on a lot of these new car manufacturers, a lot of these new car dealers. And I'm worried that it creates, I'm not worried for the car market, I'm worried for these consumers that are stuck in this position, that it creates a race to the bottom across a lot of these manufacturers. And in that case, do you foresee a consumer that's in that situation or in mass scale start walking away from some of these cars when they owe twice as much for a 2-year-old car than you can buy a brand new one for?
Zach has asked me this question in the past, and transportation is so vitally important to people today that how do you walk away from that car note and get into another car somewhere when you need that vehicle to be able to get you to and from work? What are you going to use as transportation to get to and from work? So I personally think that more people are just going to have to bite the bullet. Now, I also think, based on what you were saying, don't forget, Stellantis as a manufacturer, their brands, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, as a group, over the last 5 years, raised their MSRPs slightly more than 50%. An example of brands that are struggling that didn't do that: Nissan raised their prices about 23%. They're struggling, but they didn't try to take advantage of the situation as much as Stellantis did. So if Stellantis reduces prices across the board 30%, will the others who were nowhere near the type of MSRP increases be able to do anything along the same lines? I think, based on sales, what we've seen this year in 2024 is that we have seen a modest increase in the number of entry-level vehicles that are being purchased, while we're seeing a similar decrease in the higher-priced vehicles being purchased. So if you have the high-priced, overpriced stuff, sales slowing down, and the lower entry-level price stuff, sales increasing, the natural progression for most manufacturers would be to start producing more of the cheaper cars and fewer of the more expensive cars. So ultimately, everybody's pricing should be coming down, you would think, on average. Now, will that spur the market? We'll find out. There are many manufacturers that are hopeful that it will. We'll see.
So I can tell you, you talked earlier about, okay, well, what are these consumers going to do? They're just not going to walk away from the cars because they need cars. They're not going to be able to get into another one. But here's the thing: I've heard this story happen multiple times where a consumer walks into my car dealership
Yes.
and they say, "Well, I paid too much for this car. I'm just letting the bank take it, and then I'm buying a $3,000 car." So there
Okay.
are consumers out there that will walk, and this was even before all this negative equity problem would happen. I mean, I've done this now for 13 years, and I've heard this story repeatedly that they just like, I'm just going to let my car get repoed, and I just want to buy something that I don't have to make payments on.
Yeah.
And they'll come in, they'll buy a $3,000, $3,500 car, and they don't have payments, and they just let their other car go. Now, I mean, obviously, they're destroying their credit if they're buying from any kind of financial institute that's going to do that, and not like Bob's used. If it's from Bob's Used Cars, then it's no big deal for them. Who cares? No one's getting reported anything. But in a lot of these cases, they bought newer cars, 2, 3, 4 years old cars. And they're going to take a big hit on their credit. But there are consumers out there that are willing to just walk away from their cars. You're probably right, though. It's not going to happen in mass scale because most people are very worried about their credit. They want to be able to buy big things in the future. And the way that they do it is for payments. I wish it wasn't the case. But right now, I mean, you got the number. What's the percentage of people that are payment buyers in the car market?
85%.
Yeah. So it's everybody. That's everybody. Yep.
And I think the percentage of people that can do what you just suggested is so negligible. And the reason I say that is, if people if these people that are so buried in their cars now even had $3,000 when they bought their car and had put it down when they bought their car, they wouldn't be in such a bad position today. But most of these people didn't have $3,000 then, and they don't have $3,000 in cash now. You know,
Right.
when over 50% of the population, in case of an emergency, only has $400 that they could tap into. How many people are buying $400 cars? How many of those are you selling? So I just think it's a very small percentage of people who realize that they are so buried in their trade that they just want to give it back to the bank and have $2,500 or $3,000 or $3,500 in cash to be able to go replace that car they're going to give back to the bank with a $2,500 or $3,500 car. Now, maybe come March and April at tax time, more people will be in a position to do that. But I don't see it happening anytime soon. That's just me.
Right. And in most of those cases too, the people that are able to save up $2,500 to buy another car, you would think they would make their payments with it, right? Instead
Well,
of buy another car.
Yeah. You know, that's why they're in the position they're in. In many cases, not all cases, but in many cases.
Yeah, something's going to break in the system. You can't have all of these people that are upside down 7,500, and then it's going to get to the point if prices come down, everyone's going to be up $10,000 to $12,000. It's going to be to the point where the car market either has to stand still or something in the financial system breaks, because you're going to have so many repos, and there are already not enough repo drivers right now to go pick up all the cars. It's something's going to break, and I'm curious to know whether it's going to be the dealers and the manufacturers that break first, or if it's going to be the consumer that breaks first, or if it's going to be the banks that break first. But something's got to break.
We only the future will tell. I just think that the vast majority of people rely too much on credit, and so that even though there is always a subset of people, a percentage of people that are always bad, always have bad credit, late payments and things like that, I don't think we have seen such a significant increase in that percentage that it is a warning sign of an impending collapse. And the reason I say that is the amount of auto loans out there, even though it's in the trillions of dollars, is minuscule in comparison to what that number was on homes during the financial crisis. Because back during the financial crisis, if a human being could fog a mirror, they were approved for a car loan or for a mortgage. And to a certain degree, the same holds true for car loans, but the percentage, the outstanding amount is so minuscule compared to the outstanding mortgage amounts that it probably doesn't amount to a hill of beans as far as the economy is concerned. At least that's what economists like to tell us.
And I saw this comment right here. It says, Mike said, just get gap insurance when you get your next car. I can tell you lots and lots and lots of people that are in this situation right here. They have gap insurance right now. Gap insurance only pays the bills whenever the car gets wrecked. Yeah. And it's not helping them out at all if they want to get out of any of this negative equity situation, unless it finds a tree somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, gap insurance is a wonderful thing if your car's totaled. But if you're still driving the car, it doesn't improve your negative equity situation. Actually, it contributes to it because you had to pay for that gap insurance. You know, I used to tell people that were severely upside down, I used to jokingly say to them, Well, I don't know, keep checking the weather, find out when there's going to be a big storm, and be sure to park your car under a tree and hope that it gets struck by lightning. Not the car, but the tree. Because otherwise, you're not getting out of the vehicle. And, I here's a suspicion, strictly a suspicion. But I bet if somebody looked into the numbers, you would probably find a lot of people in Florida in particular during hurricane season who know they're upside down, know they have gap insurance, park their vehicle in a low-lying area with the hope that the damn thing gets flooded and totaled. And so I bet you the percentage of those type of situations is slightly higher than what it would normally be. Just guessing.
You have all these shows, like these storm chaser shows and everything like that. You're going to have a bunch of new storm chasers that have come into the market. They're all going to be driving Dodge Chargers and Challengers trying to find the next tornado.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be a caravan of Chargers and Challengers and Jeep Grand Wagoneers and everything else out there. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
All right, so all of you watching it here, I know most of you are not subscribed, so I need you to hit that subscribe button. Whatever we need to do to get you to hit that subscribe button, Ray will do it. So just hit it for us and let us know what he needs to do down in the comments to get you to subscribe.